Hello, hello. Welcome to the Current Review podcast. We're now on episode 5. It's crazy how quickly we're progressing. Today, I'm here with David, and we have a bunch of interesting EV news to talk about, including the crazy 13-month Hyundai IONIQ 5 lease, which is only $399 a month, zero down. We have a lot of EV political stuff to discuss. I recently wrote a story, interviewed a few people, and mainly focused on North Carolina's transition to EVs and just the politics behind it. How do lawmakers on both sides of the aisle end up agreeing that electric cars are actually really good for the economy? And finally, we have our traditional EV deal of the week. And this time it's an interesting car from Mercedes that has depreciated a ton. So we have a bunch of interesting stuff in store for today's conversation. And I guess before we start, David, it's time to talk about the politics of EVs.
Yeah, I mean, it's how we started our first episode, but I think it's good to get a little bit more in depth now as we get close to the election in terms of what does the EV future look like under a Trump administration and what does an EV future look like under a Harris administration. I think there is a lot of positives to take away from either. And
Yes,
I do think that there's a lot of threats that aren't real.
100%.
But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I've always been a big believer in the power of the private market and then market demand helping to shape the industry. I don't think we're fully there where it's self-supported. I think there still needs to be some government support. We're not at an adoption rate where it's going to take off anyways. But I think it'd be interesting to talk about what does that support look like in either
Yes.
administration as we see it today, especially as in your article you talk about how the Carolinas and the South actually are going to benefit and
Yes.
have been benefiting from prior policies and investment from the government, and how it seems like a weird dichotomy that down south seems like a very traditional, like, big engine truck, heavy gas guzzler supported state now is getting a ton of benefits from EV. And so is that going to help them change their attitudes? I don't know, you know?
100%. And I think it's interesting because we're seeing kind of a shift. So, like with North Carolina, we have VinFast, who's building their facility now. That's like the big EV only automaker. But we also have like Alpatronic in Charlotte, which is EV charger manufacturing, Iona, which is a new charge network company based in the Research Triangle, and Natron Energy, which does battery cell chemistry or sodium ion batteries, Forge Nano, which does nano coating battery basically like components in the battery. I forgot exactly what they nanocoat. I'm not too familiar with the company, but they do basically battery chemistry. Let's just say that. And a variety of other companies, Chempower, who does EV chargers, and Toyota's giant $13.9 billion battery facility in kind of near the Greensboro area. So it's crazy. So there's a bunch of new EV jobs in the area. And so what I was kind of like understanding from just getting just I was trying to immerse myself in the area. So I did go to North Carolina to check out a few of the places and talk with some of the people. And so I talked with the CEO of North Carolina's Economic Development Program. And basically the idea is, instead of framing this as like, oh, we need EVs to support the environment and stuff like that, by targeting it more as something, we need to improve our workforce, we need to future proof our economy. In that lens, you can get both Republicans and Democrats to really agree on the same thing. And I think that's really the awesome thing about electric cars is anyone who takes a deep look at the industry, sees the trends in which China is really excelling in, it's like, yeah, it's obvious EVs are the future. So why would you not want to be part of that future?
A
And
100% globally, right? Like, it's a phenomenon now that if you look at, like you said, looking at the numbers, there's no way that EVs aren't a part of the future of transportation, right? I think
100%.
earlier on, pre-Tesla or even the early days of Tesla, you could be suspect on whether or not EVs were going to make it or whether or not another technology. I know Toyota's still kind of hoping hydrogen takes off, but it's got its own set of challenges. I
Yeah,
think
you
at
might
this
need to
point,
sell over
though,
100 cars to make that possible.
yes, yeah, and have more than a handful of hydrogen fueling stations in California. And I think now it's very clear that EVs are here to stay. I mean, I'm not here to say that we're going to be 100% EVs in 2030. There were at some points in time very optimistic projections of like
Yes.
the number of EVs in the road on the mix. And I
Mhm.
think now we're getting a clearer picture now that we have a couple years of a pretty solid, consistent growth. But regardless, they're here to stay. And I think you're right, Andrew, right? Like you have to sort of accept that EVs are in the future and that I want to be a part of that future economy. And there's an
Mhm.
opportunity here to invest in the future as China has. And I think investing in manufacturing, this is our opportunity to reinvest in manufacturing in the United States so we can have a global competitive advantage if we think that it's going to be a global phenomenon that's here to stay. And I think it is, you know? Yeah.
And I'm trying to come from this as like from a very like I'm not really a political person at all. And just kind of looking at this, like the IRA has had a lot of benefits to spurring EV growth in the United States because like how I like to think of it is like if you just imagine United States as like a car dealership, right? The IRA is like a nice shiny car dealership. You look at it, you're like, okay, that's really cool. And then once you go in, all the states are like all the cars. And then you find the state or car that fits your best needs. So like maybe you're looking for a 3-row SUV and you go into the car dealership, which is like the IRA. It's like luring you in. And then you see a Kia EV9 because you're looking for a 3-row all-wheel drive electric SUV. And then you decide to buy that. So that's really what's kind of happening with the Inflation Reduction Act is it's kind of enticing automakers and maybe technology firms to move to the United States, but whether it's a manufacturing firm or um, maybe R&D center, and then you're already interested in the United States, and then you kind of choose your state. And so, like with North Carolina, getting the state, and that's a lot of state incentives, whether it's tax credits for the company and stuff like that. So there's a lot of state benefits too. And then we can even use that analogy onto the local level, whereas you're choosing counties to put that in. And
Mm-hmm.
interestingly, like Toyota is in a predominantly Republican county. It's I think there's 211% more Republicans than Democrats there. And that's a big hybrid manufacturing battery facility. I think when you look at it on the economic level, just all the political like culture wars just breaks down. I mean, you
Yeah.
see that
I
with like
mean,
investing too.
yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like you said, the bipartisan agreement is do we want to make more money on a global scale, right? I think both parties can agree with that. I think what breaks down is the specifics, right, on how that's
Yes.
handed out and how it's administered. And that's where it can
Mm-hmm.
get very political because I do think there's a lot of great things that the IRA has done that I think, Trump would break apart and set the industry back in some respects. But as he's said, because of the backing from Elon Musk, he can't really be anti EV, right?
Yes.
I would suspect that he would be pro EV, but that he would be for picking the winners. And I think it'd be a detriment for the industry as a whole and any new innovators, because I think the way that he would support the EV industry is by picking the winners and supporting them in sort of a bit of an unfair way, which is fine because I mean you can make the argument that like Tesla, for instance, has really helped EV adoption, not
Mm-hmm.
just globally but really here in the U.S. with say their supercharger investment, right?
Yeah.
And we
If
know,
it wasn't for
yeah,
Tesla, we would not have anywhere near the EV investments, EVs on the road, charging infrastructure, none of that. And it's like whenever you talk to people and they're like, oh, Tesla didn't really do much, it's like, oh no, they did. If it wasn't for Tesla, literally none of this. We probably wouldn't even be talking about EVs right now. We probably wouldn't even know each other.
no, exactly. Like it would not be a discussion, right, without Tesla, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, I mean, there is a lot of great things that they've done and a lot of great things that they've shown that they can do well. But I think now is the time as we think about government support is making it so that it's sort of available to everyone and there's a bit of free choice. Like you're saying, is you go into the dealership, right, and you get to pick your vehicle. There's a lot of options. There's 50 different states for companies to choose from. I think it's important for them to sort of have that menu of options for them to make the decision. And I think, what's more important, what's been interesting is there hasn't been talk about investments further up the supply chain. So I know like one of the big things and big criticisms has been like the lithium supply and the
Yes.
fact that China has really in the past decade or more done a ton of investments on both lithium mining and lithium processing. And that's a core part, of the battery supply chain today. And so as much
Mm-hmm.
as we have protectionist and must buy from America, this much needs to be built in America. The reality is there are just some constraints because we are behind the times, especially in lithium
Mm-hmm.
processing, you know? And I
100%.
think we have to sort of figure out ways around that or find ways to invest to eventually catch up. Like it's going to take some time. Even the
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing plants are going to take some time, and it's not guaranteed, if it's going to
Yeah.
play out. Yeah.
And that's the thing. And a lot of people like expect to see instant results with stuff. Like, say there's like some incentive package or something that state gets. There's probably gonna be people who are complaining like, "Oh, well, why'd you give all this money to company X when?" Or, oh, sorry, maybe a great example is with the Inflation Reduction Act, like the $8 billion that was allocated to building the EV chargers. I forgot the exact amount of money. I
Yeah.
think it was around that much. It was a lot
Yeah.
of money, regardless.
Yeah.
They didn't spend it yet, but it was still allocated, and they didn't build many chargers yet. And people are like, "Well, they spent billions of dollars on like just a few chargers," and it's like, yeah, a lot of this still takes time because it's like you got to go
They
through
need to they
permitting,
need
all this stuff.
they need to dole out the money. You want to make sure that it's rolled out responsibly. And actually, from a lot of people that I've talked to in the charging infrastructure world, one of the biggest challenges, somewhat ironically, of the NEVI funding is the Made in America piece, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
there just aren't enough chargers that are built enough in America, and the ones that are exorbitantly expensive. And
Mm-hmm.
and 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 we just haven't again invested enough into that part of our economy to be able to say 100% made in America. I understand where they're coming from to encourage more manufacturing facilities in America. But again, like if you're expecting this to roll out and for us to have chargers tomorrow, people got to build charging, like Alpatronics, it's going to take some time, right? Like it's going to take at least a year, probably 2 or 3, right? And they're probably
Mm-hmm.
going to be terrible at it in the beginning because in my experience with manufacturing, your yields and your quality control is very, very bad at the beginning. And until you get that under control was when you start to get into profitability, right? Like kind of just like a rule of thumb. And so,
And you see
you
that
know,
like with Tesla's vehicles too. Like old
exactly.
ones, pretty bad build quality, not building a ton. And now you get like a Model Y, and the build quality is pretty darn good, and they're very consistent.
But it took them years to get
A
there,
long time.
right? Like Tesla used to lose a ton of money per vehicle, right? It's only until now that it's starting to pay off. And so again, it's one of those things where I think everyone can agree, hopefully, if you looked at the data, EVs are the future, and it's worthwhile investing in EV manufacturing across all the supply chain here in the US. But realistically, it's going to take more than one administration or one term of a presidential election, right, for us to see the
Yes.
benefits. So I'd be interested to see how it plays out and how the money is going to be doled out, and who ends up being the winners and losers. I think that's going to be the big difference. Yeah, to be honest.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to share one quote in the story that I thought was pretty cool. If I share my screen, can you see it? Okay. So I think like the great way to end this is just kind of, we were talking about a lot of stuff, but I interviewed Levi Tilleman, and he's an author of a book called The Great Race, which is a really interesting book on China's dominance and growth in the EV industry. And he wrote this like way back in 2014 or 2015. He was very much aware of this transition well before pretty much anyone else was. And then I also talked with Mike Murphy, who's a Republican strategist who founded the EV Politics Project, which kind of focuses on breaking down the political barriers of electric cars. But regardless, I think the just really interesting way to end the article was what Levi said, which was laws are like a coloring book. You have all these outlines, but then the administration is responsible for filling in the colors. And depending on what colors you use, the picture is going to look very, very different at the end of the day. And I thought that was a pretty cool ending because while Trump maybe like, and I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, I no idea. But I think with like the Inflation Reduction Act, it's like you can stall parts of it. You can have people that just take a long time to respond to emails, like Levi said, and stuff like that. So I think the way it's implemented can definitely have an impact on the industry. So if you have like a very proactive administration that's like, yes, EVs 100%, you can get all that stuff rolled out a lot faster. But like also, if you have someone who's maybe less keen on EVs, it might just take longer.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I mean, we'll see. EVs are coming, right? EVs are part of the
Mm-hmm.
future. What it will look like in the US will that is what the different administrations will determine, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's a great quote, and I think it's a great analogy to what we can expect from an EV future based on the politics. Yeah,
Definitely.
yeah.
Levi, if you're listening, I'm going to send out an invite because I think you'd be cool to talk to about this. Yeah, kind of transitioning more over out of politics because I think this is all very interesting. But unfortunately, politics is something that you can't really control. But what you can control is what type of cars you buy or lease. Hyundai has a new $399 a month lease, 13 months, which is interesting because that's a very strange lease period. That's odd. But you can get the new Hyundai IONIQ 5. It's just the SE rear-wheel drive, so it's not like a loaded up one or anything. $399 a month with zero down, and $399 do it signing, which basically covers your first month. So that's a pretty crazy deal. What do you think?
I agree. I think this is one of those things that they're, I think, taking a book from Tesla, which has
Mm-hmm.
started offering varying types of incentives around to try to get the monthly payments down, especially around the leases. And I know a while back they were offering 0% APR financing. And actually,
Mm-hmm.
I know that was one of the triggers that got my parents to start to look at a Tesla because they're like, oh, this is
Mm-hmm.
really interesting. So I think Hyundai is taking a pretty clever look at competitor incentives and trying to leverage that to help their own efforts. And I think honestly, it's a great deal. I'm hopeful that a lot of people take advantage of this. I actually just drove a Hyundai Ioniq 5 when I was in San Francisco, and I think it's a great vehicle. It actually
Yeah.
has a ton of space. Like you don't even realize how much space it is until you really
Yeah.
get into it, and there's just a ridiculous amount of space. Yeah.
Yep. I'm a huge fan of the EGMP cars. I've driven both the IONIQ 5 and Kia EV6. I think they are both truly excellent vehicles overall. They're very well built. Technology is great. There's like a few gripes here and there with some stuff. Like, and I would honestly prefer the all-wheel drive just because it makes more horsepower. But I will say, if you disable traction control in the rear-wheel drive models, you can actually get it to, you can get the rear end out a little bit. So it's pretty fun. But yeah, I mean, just with this car, I will say, and I believe you, on the IONIQ 5, you still get 2 years of free charging, which doesn't really matter because the lease is 13 months, but you still get free charging through the full lease period. So I was thinking that might be a pretty good car if you want to do some road trips in that thing. That would be pretty cool because you got free charging. Now, I will say with this lease, it's interesting how it works because you're basically just manipulating that $7,500 point of sale or $7,500 leasing EV tax credit. So, and we see, like you said, automakers doing all this. So, Tesla can give you money off the inventory price of the car, or they could do 0% interest. And then you got leases too, where they're doing stuff like VinFast is one of them doing like crazy cheap leases, $199 a month. So yeah, I mean, like now is the time. If you're looking at EV, like there are deals, and there's so many different cars to choose from. So I think
I think
it's
it's also smart because it's not a full commitment of buying a car. And I think there's
yes.
a psychology in terms of if I don't like it, well, it's only a lease, right? And I can
Mhm.
turn it back. And then from the manufacturer side, it's their opportunity to impress you, to get you to like it and either buy out at the end of the lease, which I don't know how often that is. I'd be interested in what the statistics are, but
Yes.
or to buy another Hyundai, like buy the new version, because there are a ton of really interesting variants of the 5 coming out, like the
Mhm.
5N, the 5 XRT. I've heard a
Yes,
lot of
and that's a
interest in that one.
2025 one with the NAX port on it. So maybe they're just trying to
Exactly.
get rid of some of these older ones too. But interestingly, the Ionic 5 had really good sales, but the Ionic 6 has had pretty terrible sales based on the sales data, just in comparison. The SUV outsold the sedan probably by like a factor of like five. So I think
Americans
it
just
might
like
be worth.
SUVs.
Yes, but I think it might be interesting because maybe with some of these leftover Ionic 6s that are just sitting on lots, Hyundai might pull some strings on those lease deals. Because if you can get an Ionic 6 for around that price too, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're solid vehicles as well overall, right? Like great charging speeds, great range. I mean, honestly, I think that's sort of the model for like the ideal EV right now that fits most people's criteria in terms of price, range, charging speed, all that. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think if the Tesla Model 3 ceased to exist and if Tesla's whole lineup ceased to exist, like Kia, Hyundai EVs are number one. I mean, I think now like with the new Model 3 rear wheel drive, I particularly like it because you get like premium audio standard, you get ventilated seats, you get all the features you want. Whereas like in the Hyundai's, you got to pay extra, you got to get like limited trim and all that stuff, and that gets pretty expensive. But I mean, yeah, the Hyundai EVs, like I mean, even looking back, I think probably one of the most enjoyable cars I've driven this whole year was just the regular Kia EV6, and I kind of miss it honestly. It was a very nice car.
I will say, as a one counterpoint,
Okay,
the Teslas have much better software.
100, totally agree. Yeah, the software is pretty
So
bad.
if the software matters to you and like the UI and the interface matters, then Tesla still wins out. But I mean, for a lot of people, they don't care as much. They don't really get into some of the more technical features like
Some
pairing your
people are fine with just
phone.
CarPlay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And then for the most part you should be fine. But for me, that was like the one stunning difference that I noticed right off the bat, which was
Mhm.
like my ability to learn how to use the car took a little bit longer than a Tesla, which was super like I will say the Teslas are crazy intuitive, you know.
Yes, I think Teslas are so easy because, like, for instance, I've been driving the Polestar for like the past couple weeks, and great car. The tech in there is not that great. And like even when I'm driving it, I'm like, just like for instance, there's to just adjust the climate controls. First, if you're on the main screen, it doesn't pop up. So you press the car button at the top of the screen. It's probably hard to explain this. But then if you like adjust the volume, then the volume slider is going to appear where you're supposed to click there. So then you have to wait for it to refresh. And like meanwhile, the Tesla, it's just like your AC vent's right there off to the left. You click it right there on the screen because people are like, oh, I don't like everything through the screen. But it's like, it depends on how it's made. Like everything through the screen on Tesla is fine, but like even some of these cars, like the Hyundai's, it's like they have some of the buttons there, but it's just not too great.
No. No, it still takes a little while to learn how to use it appropriately, you know? It's yeah, I will say, I mean, that is I think one of the stark differences that we'll continue to see between these natively new tech company brands like Rivian, Tesla, Lucid compared to the traditional OEMs that take a different approach to their software and the software updates. And we'll see how much of a difference that makes over time. I'm not sure.
Definitely.
I've appreciated a ton of the OTAs, and it allows things that are not as good on an early product to get better.
Hmm.
But again, then if you're Ford or GM or one of them, if you just make it good from the get go, do you really need a ton of OTAs? I don't know.
Yeah, like even like the Chevy Bolt, like that car, the infotainment in that car is fine. Like it's like it's everything you need, and it's a cheap car, so like no one really complains. But it's like then you get like a Tesla, and it's like and a Rivian, it's just like obviously like tons of features, really great connectivity and stuff like that. And I don't know. I mean, I love like all of Tesla's connectivity features, like even like Sentry mode, like that saved me when I got in an accident because I had the footage of it to show. So yeah, just kind of stuff like
I'm
that.
surprised that the other car manufacturers haven't taken like Google or Apple up on the platform concept where, you know, basically they make it a platform and developers can create new features and experiences through their infotainment.
Hmm.
Guessing it's because from what I've heard, like Rivian is struggling to justify to go on, you know, to adopt one of those platforms because of the amount of control that they lose. I get that, but I also tend to find that like you don't get new experimentation or new features unless you open it up to developers who test weird things and create new products. Like maybe there's something cool that's like an adaptive climate control based on who's in the car, right? Like personal
Hmm.
preferences. I know Rivian just introduced that, but like if you had developers, you could make something that's even crazier or more sophisticated. I don't know, you know,
Yeah.
but
Well, I think like I guess just one more thing on technology fronts. I don't want to harp on too much, but like Tesla, for instance, too, like even when you get a loaner car, it just automatically syncs your profile. So like your seat's in the same position, everything. And you're just like, what? Like this is like your music is and it's like that's pretty crazy. That's just a perk of having a car with good onboard computers, great software, all that stuff. And I don't know, it'd be kind of cool if like Tesla could work with other automakers to maybe share some of their or sell maybe some of their connectivity and software in whatever capacity, just because So a lot of these cars are lagging behind.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. We'll see. We'll see if Tesla can share more of what they've uncovered now that they have a ton more experience. But like they have with the superchargers, and I think it's been great for everyone.
Mhm.
Yeah. Anyways, you want to move on to the EV deal of the week?
Sure. Yeah. So this week's EV deal is going to be the Mercedes EQE. And this is kind of crazy. These cars are very expensive, brand new. Looking about 80 grand brand new. So if we just look at let me just make sure my filters are right. I probably should check before, but that's all right. Keep in mind, $80,000 brand new. And look, here's a CPO one, 43,000 miles. Granted, that's kind of high, but like $39,000, which is just like, it's like, what? Like that's just insane depreciation. Like in a year to lose 40 grand. And you can even get the SUVs in that price range too. Now, even
Yeah,
if we like look
I
at,
mean, a Mercedes at that price period is a good deal, I think, right? And not to mention the fact that it's an EV, right? Which has the stigma of being more expensive. So yeah, that looks like pretty amazing to me, you know?
100% frameless windows, one of my favorite features, but you get like Burmester sound system, you get ventilated seats. I'm not sure if it's extra in there. At least in the EQS, you get it as standard. But I mean, these cars are pretty cool, especially with like the ambient lighting and stuff. And for 40,000, that's about the price of a new Model Y with the tax credit, like an all-wheel drive one. So I don't know.
Yeah,
Prices are
and
coming down.
you get the great support of like the Mercedes-Benz like dealer network, which I know they've been known to have some of the best dealer services out there.
Hmm.
Even though I think you were mentioning that there has been some issues historically with these
Yes,
vehicles.
there's been so many people. Whenever I write stories on the Mercedes EVs, they are like, "Do not buy this car." They're like, "I've had been serviced so many times." Like me, my perspective, because I'm kind of weird. I'm all right if it has issues because I bring it into service. I get a loaner car. That's wear and tear and mileage that would not be on my personal car. So that's how I think about it. But obviously, probably not a lot of other people think like that because it's just like they're like, "I just want my car
Yeah,
back."
I don't know. For me, I see going to the dealer is almost like going to the dentist. I know I need to do it, but it's never really like the most pleasant experience. I mean, there are a handful of dealers that do service really well,
As
and
long
I
as you're
think
under warranty. If
Mercedes,
you're
yeah,
out of warranty on Mercedes, they're like, get out of here.
yeah.
Like,
I
give us
mean,
your money.
that's the big thing. Well, that's also why you would do CPO, right? You would do
Hmm.
CPO, and I think again, like it's a great way if you're like interested or curious with EVs at all, but really want the backing of a solid brand, like we were talking about last time, how much the branding goes, like with the Honda, for instance, right? It's basically a GM car with the Honda badging, but seems to do pretty well because people trust Honda as a brand. I think in general, people trust Mercedes as a brand and I think they're really trying to figure it out. I mean, and so it's a great deal. I think now, right? To
Hmm.
get a 2023 EQE. Yeah, that looks awesome.
Yeah, definitely. And the EQS is also coming down a lot. You can get EQSs and Lofties, which is literally like an electric Mercedes S class. So there's
There you
cool
go.
options out there.
Yeah,
And they get really good real world range. Inside EVs got 395 miles at 70 miles per hour on the EQS compared to an EPA range of 350. So positive delta there. So not bad.
nice,
It's probably a nice
nice.
road tripper, unless
Yes,
something breaks down.
but there's Mercedes dealers everywhere. So as long as you're under factory
Yeah,
warranty, you should be okay. Yeah,
we'll see. Maybe once one's like 20,000, I could buy it, and then I will give my review on how reliable they are.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. But cool. Well, I think that's all. Is that all that we have for today?
That's pretty much all the news this week. There hasn't been too eventful because last couple of weeks with Cybercab and the Scout, which I did happen to put a deposit down on it. So I will
Very
keep you
cool.
posted, and whenever sometime in the future that will actually come through.
Sure. Well, the last thing to mention, I guess, honorable mention for this episode is Volvo and Polestar just got access to the
Supercharger.
supercharger network. Yeah.
Yep.
So
So if I
that's
had
I
an
think pretty big.
adapter, yeah, no, if I had an
I'll
adapter, I would
lend you
definitely
mine
check it
if you
out.
want.
Okay, yeah, I'll have to
If you
see.
want to check it
Because
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that would be really cool just to see if it worked. Just plug it in because got the Tesla app. All I need is the adapter because I have the Polestar for now. So
Oh,
that'd
yeah,
be
yeah.
pretty
I mean,
interesting.
I'll say it's interesting since getting the adapter though, I've come across more superchargers with the Magic Dock and not having to
Hmm,
actually use it, which is interesting.
interesting.
I mean, I've used it a couple of times, which is kind of cool. It because the superchargers are just in the most convenient places. I will say you do pay a little bit extra. I've experienced like 55 cents per kilowatt hour and up,
Okay,
which is on the
more
pricey
than
side.
EA.
Yeah, it's on the pricey side, and the adapter does get warm, which is a little freaky.
Mm,
But it trusts that it's not gonna blow up or anything like that because it is made from Tesla, the one that I
yeah,
have, and yeah, I mean, again, it just works. So that's super nice. I mean, that's all you could really ask for is great location and that it just works. You know? Yeah.
yeah. And I think definitely on road trips, I would be interested in paying a premium to get to a charger that works.
Exactly. Well,
And there's one
that's
that's
why.
open.
Exactly. That's why I tend to not mind. I don't do it a ton, right? And it just works, and they tend to be nicer places. It's almost like for gas prices. You see, 5 cents or 10 cents a gallon difference. If you think about it, for the amount that you're filling up, like how big of a deal is that? I mean, the kilowatt
Yeah,
hours are maybe a bit more. I know my Rivian has upwards of 100 kilowatt hours. So if I were to go full up, a 10-cent difference is quite a bit. But I don't do it that often, and I'm usually not going up 100. I'm usually filling up like 40, 50 kilowatts max.
yeah. And people will be fine paying more for gas if it's like at a Buc-ee's or a QT or something like that. Or I guess Wawa for being up north. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. But awesome. Yeah, well, yeah, a lot of cool things. We'll see how things play out next week, which I think that's after post-election. So,
post-election and something's happening November 7th. It's like Lucid Gravity. That's going to be exciting. They're going to open orders for Lucid Gravity November 7th. So pretty soon.
exciting.
So I'm going to be very excited to see what's going to happen. So 8 days from now. So I'm
Yeah,
excited.
I'm excited because the Air, I think, was a very solidly built vehicle. I'm excited to
Mm,
see what they do with the SUV. And again, like Americans tend to love SUVs, so a
hmm
well-built SUV, it'll be exciting to see how well received it is.
Yep. And there's going to be tons of infotainment upgrades because I was able to see that firsthand, and it's a lot better than Air. So I'm
Very
excited.
cool. Very cool.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well,
All
anyways,
right.
until next week then. All right.
Until next week. All right. Thank you very much, David. It's great talking.
Likewise. All right. See you, everyone.
Yep.
All right. Bye.